The Greenbrier is the most beautiful hotel in West Virginia. It has been welcoming guests since 1778. Princes, presidents, diplomats, the kind of people for whom the word resort was invented. In 1959, it was also the most carefully watched construction site in America. Nobody was supposed to know what they were building. Most people didn't, but some of the workers who poured the concrete and hung the blast doors and installed the plumbing figured it out anyway, not because anyone told them, because a fool could tell. That's exactly what one of them said, years later, when he was finally allowed to speak. Nobody came out and said it was a bomb shelter, but they weren't building it to keep the rain off them. A fool would have known. 3 of those workers said something else. What they said has not been part of the official story. In the late 1950s, President Dwight Eisenhower was worried about one thing above everything else: nuclear war. Not whether it would happen, when. The assumption at the highest levels of American government was that the Soviet Union would eventually use its atomic arsenal. The question was what would survive afterward, who would govern a country with its cities in ash, how Congress would function if Washington was gone. Eisenhower had been quietly addressing this problem for years. Each branch of government needed a place to go. The White House had Mount Weather in Virginia. The Pentagon had Raven Rock in Pennsylvania. Congress had nothing. In 1956, Eisenhower reached out to Walter Toohey, president of the Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad. The C&O owned a property in White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia, a resort in the Allegheny Mountains, 4 hours from Washington by car, 6 by rail, far enough from the capital to survive a direct strike, close enough to reach quickly, isolated enough to keep secret. They called it Project X, then Project Casper, eventually Project Greek Island. The Greenbrier was the location. The cover story was simple. The resort was announcing a new addition, the West Virginia Wing, new guest rooms, new meeting spaces, a large exhibition hall that would serve as a venue for trade shows and conventions, perfectly routine for a resort of the Greenbrier's scale. Nobody needed to know that the exhibition hall was designed to host joint sessions of Congress after a nuclear holocaust. In 1959, the digging started. Local residents called it the Big Hole. It was the largest excavation they had ever seen. Contractors arrived with equipment. Concrete trucks came and kept coming after that. 50,000 tons of concrete went into the ground beneath White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia. The walls they poured were 3 to 5 feet thick. At dinner tables in town, people speculated. The Charleston Gazette, West Virginia's largest newspaper, heard the rumors and wrote to the hotel. "We hear you are building a bomb shelter for the president." The hotel vice president sent back a careful reply. He wrote that he knew nothing about a bomb shelter for the president, that they were constructing an exhibit hall, new meeting rooms, and approximately 100 air-conditioned guest rooms. Every word of that was technically true and completely misleading. Every worker on the project was investigated by the FBI before being allowed on site. Every single one signed a non-disclosure agreement. Not the kind that lawyers draft for corporate mergers, the kind that comes with a federal security clearance and an implicit understanding of what happens to people who talk. One contractor, years later, described the moment he realized what he was building. He had been hired to install plumbing fixtures in what the blueprints called an exhibition hall. He looked at his supply order and did the math. "This is an exhibit hall. We've got 110 urinals we just installed. What in the hell are you going to exhibit?" He signed the paperwork. He kept working. He kept quiet. The official blueprints showed what the government wanted to show: 2 subterranean levels below the West Virginia Wing, Level 1 and Level 2, combined square footage of 112,000, 153 rooms, 18 dormitories, 12-bed hospital, power plant, television studio, separate chambers for the House of Representatives and the Senate, enough bunk beds for 1,100 people, and something that appeared in the supply inventory under a category listed as waste management, an incinerator, the kind used not just for trash, the kind that could function as a crematorium. Nobody asked about that line item out loud. The bunker was completed in October 1962, just in time. 2 weeks after the final blast door was sealed behind its false front of decorative wallpaper, the Cuban Missile Crisis began. The United States and the Soviet Union came closer to nuclear war than at any point before or since. For 13 days, the scenario the Greenbrier bunker had been built to address was actively in progress. The bunker was never activated. Members of Congress were not summoned to West Virginia. The trains did not run. 30 years of stocked supplies, food for 1,000 people for 60 days, pharmaceuticals, water tanks, fuel, sat in the dark below the exhibition hall while history happened above ground. The bunker was maintained in silence for 3 decades. 12 to 15 government employees worked at the Greenbrier around the clock under the cover of a company called Forsyth Associates. Officially, they were audio-visual technicians there to service the hotel's 1,100 televisions. Their real employer was the United States government. Their real job was keeping the bunker ready to be inhabited within hours of a presidential order. The first manager of Forsyth Associates was a man named John Lundis, former cryptographic expert with the Army Signal Corps. Top secret security clearance, previously stationed at the Pentagon. He maintained the fiction for years. Fritz Bugas, who later ran Forsyth operations, said that his team spent about 20% of their time actually fixing televisions. The rest was bunker maintenance, changing filters, rotating pharmaceuticals, updating the bed assignments. For 30 years, each of the 1,100 beds was assigned to a specific member of Congress or senior staff. When a senator retired or died, someone had to update the list. When medication expired, someone had to replace it. The machine never stopped running. Hotel guests played golf on the lawn. Presidents held meetings. The dining rooms stayed warm. And below the exhibition hall, in rooms that no guest ever entered, the end of the world waited patiently to be needed. Now, here is what the official record says about the Greenbrier bunker. 2 levels. Documented, accounted for in every declassified document, every tour brochure, every Washington Post article, every book written about Project Greek Island. Level 1 and Level 2. In the months after the 1992 exposure, when journalists and historians began interviewing construction workers who had long since served their silence, 3 men said something that did not make it into the official account. Their names appear in construction payroll records from 1959 and 1960. They were concrete pourers, the men who physically built the walls of the structure, who knew from the weight of their forms and the depth of their scaffolding exactly how far down the structure went. All 3 said, independently, in conversations that were never published in any major outlet, that the blueprints they worked from did not account for everything they poured below the 2nd level, something they described as a continuation. Passages, not rooms, passages, going in a direction that the official floor plan did not show. They did not know what the passages led to. They were not told. 2 of the 3 had been pulled off the job for a period of about 9 days in the spring of 1960 and reassigned to surface work without explanation. When they returned, that section of the pour was complete, done by a different crew, and the scaffolding was already down. The 3rd man said he had walked one of the passages before it was sealed. He said it went further than the structure above it. He said the walls in that section were different, thicker, he thought, and a different grade of concrete. He said he signed a 2nd NDA for that section specifically, a 2nd one. He didn't remember the exact wording. He said it was different from the first. None of this appears in any official history of Project Greek Island. In May of 1992, Washington Post reporter Ted Gupp published the story that ended the secret. The government decommissioned the Greenbrier bunker immediately, the day the story ran, not after a review, not after deliberation. That day, the Forsyth Associates staff were withdrawn. The official relationship between the U.S. government and the Greenbrier was severed. The supplies were removed. The bed assignments were shredded. The bunker was turned over to the resort. Today, you can tour it. 90 minutes, $52 for adults. You descend into the West Virginia wing and pass through a blast door that weighs 25 tons and is 19.5 inches thick. You walk a corridor 433 feet long. You see the decontamination showers, the dormitories, the cafeteria, the Senate chamber, the House chamber, the communication equipment from 3 generations of Cold War technology. The tour covers approximately 112,000 square feet across 2 levels. The guides are knowledgeable, the history is documented, the questions are welcome. There is no portion of the tour that goes below the 2nd level. When guests ask, and some do ask, the answer is that the 2 levels are the complete structure. 3 construction workers from 1959 and 1960 said something different. The government decommissioned the bunker the same day the story ran. Not the week after, not the month after, that day. Whatever is below the 2nd level of the Greenbrier bunker in White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia, if anything is below the 2nd level, was sealed in 1962, maintained for 30 years, and has been behind a 25-ton blast door in the dark ever since. Nobody on the public tours goes down that far. Nobody says there is anything to find. 3 men who poured the concrete said otherwise, and one of them signed a second NDA that nobody has ever produced.